The day I almost gave up, the world kept moving like nothing was wrong. I remember standing in my kitchen before sunrise, the house still dark, the floor cold beneath my bare feet. The kettle screamed louder than it needed to, sharp and impatient, like it was scolding me for hesitating. My hands were shaking so badly I spilled coffee grounds across the counter, and instead of wiping them up, I just stood there staring at the mess, brown dust scattered like all the plans I used to have. That was the morning I realized how tired I was. Not sleepy tired, soul tired. Outside, a neighbor's car started, then pulled away. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked. Life was continuing at its regular pace, and I felt like I'd been left behind, standing still while everything else marched forward without me. I pressed my palm flat against my chest, waiting for my breathing to slow. It didn't. All I could think was, I don't know how much longer I can do this. For a long time, I didn't move. That moment didn't come out of nowhere. It was the quiet result of years of trying to be strong without admitting how heavy things had become. From the outside, my life looked ordinary, stable even, respectable. But ordinary lives can carry extraordinary weight, and no one teaches you what to do when the weight doesn't lift. Before everything started unraveling, my days followed a familiar rhythm. I woke early, always before the alarm, because my body had learned not to rest too deeply. I made breakfast the same way every morning: toast slightly too dark, eggs scrambled soft, coffee strong enough to cut through the fog in my head. I took pride in small routines. They made me feel dependable, useful. I worked a job that paid the bills, but never quite paid back the effort I put into it. Still, I showed up on time, smiled when expected, listened when others needed to vent. I had learned early in life that being dependable was a kind of currency. People might not always thank you for it, but they relied on you, and sometimes that had to be enough. At home, I kept things neat, not spotless, but cared for. The couch cushions fluffed, shoes lined up by the door, family photos dusted regularly, even though looking at them sometimes made my throat tighten. I cooked meals that took time, because food felt like proof that I was still contributing something good to the world. From the outside, no one would have guessed how often I lay awake at night staring at the ceiling fan, counting rotations, wondering when I'd started feeling so far away from the person I used to be. There was a time when I believed struggle always led somewhere better. I'd grown up hearing that if you worked hard enough, endured long enough, stayed kind enough, things would eventually make sense. And for years, that belief carried me. It helped me survive disappointments, losses, the quiet sacrifices no one claps for. But belief, I learned, can thin out over time. It can wear down the same way fabric does, soft at first, then threadbare, then suddenly torn. The first sign that something was wrong wasn't dramatic, it was subtle. I stopped looking forward to things, even small pleasures, Sunday mornings, familiar songs on the radio. The smell of clean laundry felt muted, like someone had turned the volume down on my emotions. I told myself it was just a phase. Everyone goes through dry seasons. I pushed forward because that's what I had always done. Keep moving, keep functioning, don't stop long enough to feel too much. But my body noticed before my mind did. I started waking with a heaviness in my chest that didn't ease after coffee. My shoulders stayed tense all day, as if I was bracing for something that never arrived. Some afternoons, I'd sit in my car after work, hands resting on the steering wheel, staring through the windshield because I didn't have the energy to turn the key. Still, I kept going. I always did. What finally cracked me wasn't one big failure. It was a series of small ones stacked too high to ignore. A missed bill, a conversation I didn't have the strength to finish, a look in the mirror where I barely recognized the woman staring back, eyes dull, mouth set in a line that had forgotten how to soften. And then came that morning in the kitchen, the spilled coffee grounds, the screaming kettle, and the realization that I was standing still because I didn't know which direction forward even was anymore. I slid down into the chair at the table, the wood cool against my arms. The clock on the wall ticked loudly in the silence, each second landing like a reminder that time was passing whether I was ready or not. I thought about all the times I'd told myself, just get through today. How many todays had I survived that way? For the first time, I let myself ask a dangerous question. What if I can't keep going like this? The thought scared me, not because I didn't want to move forward, but because I didn't know how. Somewhere along the way, keep moving had turned into don't stop, and I had forgotten that the two aren't always the same. I sat there until the coffee got cold, listening to the house wake up around me, and in that quiet, something small but stubborn stirred inside my chest. Not hope, not yet, just a faint refusal to end the story there. I didn't know it then, but that was the beginning of everything changing. After that morning in the kitchen, I didn't suddenly become brave or clear-headed. Life didn't pause to let me catch up. I rinsed the mug, wiped the counter, and stepped back into my routine like nothing had happened. That's how survival often works, not with big decisions, but with quiet compliance. I went to work that day wearing the same neutral expression I'd practiced for years. The office smelled faintly of old carpet and burnt coffee, a smell so familiar it barely registered anymore. People greeted me in passing. "Morning, how are you?" I answered the way I always did. "Fine." The word came out automatically, smooth and empty. No one asks follow-up questions when you sound convincing. I had built a reputation for being steady, reliable, the one who could handle pressure without complaining. It's strange how those labels, once earned, can turn into cages. Because when you're known for being strong, people stop noticing when you're exhausted. They assume you'll manage. And most of the time, you do. Until one day you realize you've been managing your way into nothingness. At lunch, I sat at my desk instead of joining the others. I poked at food I couldn't taste, scrolling through my phone without really seeing anything. Photos of other people's lives passed by. Smiles, celebrations, milestones. I didn't envy them. I just felt disconnected, like I was watching through thick glass. On the drive home, I took the long way without meaning to. The sun was low, painting the sky in soft oranges and tired pinks. Traffic lights flickered on one by one, steady and patient. I thought about how lights don't rush you. They change when it's time, not when you beg them to. At home, the silence greeted me first. No voices, no laughter, just the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking clock. I kicked off my shoes and stood there longer than necessary, as if waiting for someone to tell me what to do next. That evening, I tried to rest. I really did. I turned off my phone, sat on the couch, and stared at the wall. But rest doesn't come easily when your mind has learned to stay alert. Thoughts crept in anyway, unfinished tasks, old regrets, questions with no clear answers. I thought about the years behind me, about the choices that seemed small at the time, but slowly shaped the life I now inhabited. I thought about how often I had chosen the practical path, the responsible one, the one that made sense on paper. None of those choices were wrong, but together they had left me feeling like a background character in my own story. The next few weeks passed like that, functional on the surface, fragile underneath. I kept my schedule, paid my bills, cooked meals, but something inside me had shifted. I was paying attention now, noticing how often I sighed without realizing it, how my shoulders stayed tight even when nothing was happening, how joy felt like a distant memory rather than a current experience. The first real change came from somewhere unexpected. One afternoon, I stopped by the grocery store after work. It was crowded and loud, carts rattling, children crying, announcements echoing overhead. I moved slowly through the aisles, tired and impatient, when I noticed an elderly woman struggling to reach a box on the top shelf. I hesitated. I was exhausted. Helping felt like effort I wasn't sure I had, but something nudged me forward anyway. I reached up, handed her the box, and she smiled at me with a warmth that surprised me. "Thank you, dear," she said. Her voice was soft but steady. "Keep moving forward. That's all we can do at our age." I laughed politely, but the words stayed with me. Keep moving forward. I'd heard that phrase my whole life, on posters, in speeches, in books, but hearing it from a stranger in that ordinary moment hit differently. She wasn't preaching, she wasn't minimizing pain. She was stating a simple truth worn smooth by experience. That night, I lay in bed replaying the moment. Her hands had trembled slightly as she took the box. Her smile was genuine, not forced. There was no rush in her movements, no panic in her eyes, just acceptance and momentum. I started to notice how often life offered small moments like that. A coworker pausing to ask if I really was okay. A song on the radio that matched my mood too closely. The way the morning light crept across my kitchen floor, even on days I felt heavy. None of it fixed anything, but it softened the edges. I began making tiny changes, not resolutions, those felt too big, too public, just quiet adjustments. I took 5 minutes in the morning to sit without distractions. I walked around the block after dinner instead of collapsing on the couch. I wrote down one thought each night before bed, even if it was messy or incomplete. Some days, the only thing I wrote was, I showed up. And on the hardest days, that was enough. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. This wasn't about proving anything. It was about rebuilding trust with myself, learning to believe that I could take one step without knowing where the whole path led. Still, doubt lingered. There were mornings when the weight returned full force, pressing down on my chest like before. Moments when I wondered if I was just delaying an inevitable collapse. Progress, I learned, is not a straight line. It circles, it stalls, it tests you. But something had changed. I was no longer standing still. I didn't know it yet, but a deeper test was coming, one that would force me to decide whether moving forward was just a phrase or a choice I was finally ready to make. The thing about moving forward is that it doesn't just carry you toward healing. Sometimes it carries you straight toward truths you've been avoiding. At first, I thought the uneasiness was just my nerves adjusting to change. I had started paying attention to my life again, and awareness can feel uncomfortable before it feels empowering. Still, there were moments, small, almost forgettable ones, that made me pause. It started with my sister. We'd always been close in the way people are when they grow up, learning to share space, responsibility, and silence. She was younger than me by 3 years, louder, more impulsive. Where I was careful, she was bold. Where I planned, she leapt. For most of our lives, our differences balanced each other. Lately, though, our conversations felt off. She called less often. When she did, her voice carried a distraction I hadn't heard before, like she was half present, half somewhere else. When I asked how she was, she gave vague answers. Busy, you know how it is. Then she'd change the subject quickly, asking about my job, my routine, anything that didn't require her to explain herself. I told myself I was imagining it. Everyone gets busy, everyone pulls back sometimes. But then there was the look she gave me one Sunday afternoon when I mentioned feeling tired again. We were sitting at my kitchen table, the same one where I'd frozen weeks earlier. Sunlight streamed in through the window, illuminating dust in the air. I said, casually, "Some days still feel heavier than they should." She stopped stirring her tea. It was just for a second, but I saw it, the flicker of something in her eyes. Guilt, maybe, or worry, or fear. She forced a smile and said, "You've always been strong. You'll get through it." The words sounded supportive, but her tone was rushed, clipped, like she needed the conversation to end. After she left, I replayed the moment in my mind, the way her spoon clinked too loudly against the cup, the way she avoided my eyes. I stood at the sink, washing dishes long after the water turned cold, trying to convince myself it meant nothing. Around the same time, things at work began to shift. A project I'd been leading was suddenly reassigned without explanation. Meetings happened without my knowledge. When I asked questions, answers were polite but vague. Management decision, nothing personal. I nodded and accepted it, the old reflex kicking in. Don't make waves, keep moving. But I started noticing how often decisions were being made around me instead of with me. One afternoon, I overheard two coworkers talking in hushed voices near the copy machine. They stopped when they saw me, exchanged a look, and walked away. I stood there holding a stack of papers, my heart pounding harder than the situation seemed to warrant. I told myself I was being sensitive, that stress was coloring everything darker than it really was. Still, the pattern was there. Conversations that ended abruptly, emails that felt carefully worded, a general sense that something important was happening just out of my reach. At home, the feeling followed me. I began finding small things out of place. Drawers slightly open, papers shifted, a folder missing from where I always kept it. Nothing obvious, nothing I could point to and say, this is wrong, but enough to make me uneasy. One evening, while sorting through old documents, I realized a few important files were gone. Bank statements, insurance papers, things I rarely needed but always kept organized. I searched every drawer, every folder, every box. My pulse quickened with each empty space. Finally, I sat on the floor, surrounded by papers, my back against the couch, trying to breathe through the rising panic. You're overreacting, I told myself. You probably moved them and forgot. But the truth was, I had always been meticulous about those things. Organization was one of the ways I kept control when life felt uncertain. That night, sleep didn't come easily. I lay awake listening to the house settle, the soft pops and creaks of cooling wood. My mind ran through possibilities, most of them harmless, a few of them not so. The next day, I called my sister. She didn't answer. I left a message, light and casual. Hey, just checking in. Call me when you get a chance. I stared at my phone longer than necessary after hanging up, waiting for it to ring. It didn't. Hours passed, then days. When she finally called back, her voice was too cheerful, overly bright, like a smile stretched thin. She apologized for being busy, laughed it off, asked about my week. I listened closely this time, not just to her words, but to the spaces between them. When I asked about the documents, framing it as a joke, something like, "You didn't secretly reorganize my life while I wasn't looking, did you?" There was a pause, just a heartbeat too long. She laughed, but it sounded brittle. Why would I do that? I shrugged, even though she couldn't see me. I don't know, just missing a few things. Well, she said quickly, you've been under a lot of stress, easy to misplace stuff. The call ended soon after. I sat there with the phone in my hand, the room quiet around me, and felt something settle heavily in my chest. Not fear, not yet, something closer to clarity. For the first time, I allowed myself to consider a possibility I'd been avoiding. What if the uneasiness wasn't coming from within me? What if it was a response to something real? I didn't jump to conclusions. I didn't confront anyone. I simply started paying closer attention. I checked my accounts more frequently. I saved emails. I made copies of documents. I listened more than I spoke, observed more than I reacted. And the more I watched, the clearer it became. Something in my life was changing without my consent. I didn't know the truth was yet, but I could feel it approaching, slow and inevitable, like a door quietly opening in the dark. The truth didn't arrive all at once. It seeped in slowly, the way cold does, quiet at first, then impossible to ignore. I found it on a Wednesday afternoon, the kind of day that feels ordinary enough to lower your guard. The sky was overcast, gray without rain, and the house felt heavier than usual. I had taken the day off work, telling myself I needed rest. What I really needed, though, was answers. I was going through a box in the hall closet when I saw it, a manila envelope tucked behind winter scarves and an old pair of boots. It wasn't mine. I knew that immediately. The label on the front was neat, deliberate, written in my sister's handwriting. My name was on it. I sat down on the floor, the carpet rough against my legs, and stared at the envelope for a long time before opening it. There was a strange calm in me then, the kind that comes right before something shatters. My hands didn't shake, my breathing stayed steady. I remember thinking, whatever this is, I need to see it clearly. Inside were copies of documents I recognized instantly. Bank forms, authorization papers, legal correspondence. My vision blurred as I scanned the words, my mind struggling to keep up with what my eyes were seeing. There it was in black and white, decisions made in my name, accounts accessed, arrangements discussed without my knowledge. Not stolen, exactly, handled, managed, as if my life had become something that could be organized without my consent. I felt a tightness spread through my chest, sharp and hot. The room seemed to tilt slightly, like I was standing on unsteady ground. I flipped through the pages faster now, my heart pounding. Dates jumped out at me, recent ones, times when I'd been tired, distracted, barely holding myself together. Times when I'd trusted the people closest to me to respect my boundaries. One letter stopped me cold. It referenced a plan, long-term, carefully worded, about protecting my interests in case I was deemed unable to manage ongoing responsibilities. Unable. The word echoed in my head, cruel in its calmness. I dropped the papers and pressed my mouth to my mouth, a soft sound escaping me before I could stop it. It wasn't a scream, it wasn't even a cry. It was the realization settling deep in my bones. They thought I was breaking, or worse, they were waiting for me to. I don't know how long I sat there, minutes maybe longer. The house was silent, holding its breath with me. Finally, I gathered the papers back into the envelope, stood up slowly, and placed it on the table. I needed to hear it from her. When my sister arrived later that evening, she smiled like nothing was wrong. She kicked off her shoes, asked if I'd eaten, commented on how tired I looked. Each word landed heavier than the last. I waited until we were sitting across from each other at the kitchen table. The same light, different truth. "I found something today," I said quietly. She froze. Not dramatically, just enough for me to know. I slid the envelope across the table toward her. "Can you explain this to me?" She didn't open it. She didn't need to. Her shoulders slumped, and for a moment she looked very young, very human. "I was trying to help," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Help. I felt a bitter laugh rise in my throat, but I swallowed it down. "By making decisions about my life without telling me?" Her eyes filled with tears. "You haven't been yourself. You're exhausted all the time. I was worried." "So you went behind my back?" "I didn't want to upset you." The words felt absurd in the air between us. I leaned back in my chair, studying her face. The familiar curve of her smile, the nervous way she tucked her hair behind her ear. This was someone I loved, trusted, someone who had watched me carry too much for too long. And yet, "Did you think I wouldn't notice?" I asked. She hesitated. That was answer enough. I stood up then, unable to stay seated. My legs felt unsteady, but my voice stayed calm. "You don't get to decide when I stop being capable. You don't get to rewrite my life because you're uncomfortable with my struggle." "I was scared," she cried now. "I thought if things got worse—" "Worse for who?" I interrupted softly. The question hung between us. She didn't answer. That night, after she left, I sat alone in the dark, the envelope still on the table. Anger came in waves, hot, sharp, undeniable. But underneath it was something else. Grief, not just for the betrayal, but for the realization that my vulnerability had been mistaken for weakness. At work, the final piece fell into place a few days later. I was called into a meeting with management. The room smelled faintly of stale coffee and disinfectant. They spoke carefully, using gentle language, explaining that concerns had been raised about my capacity and well-being. They referenced conversations, observations, reports. I listened without interrupting, my hands folded neatly in my lap. When they finished, I said calmly, "Who raised these concerns?" There was a pause. A name was mentioned. My sister. I nodded slowly, the truth settling with a strange sense of relief. At least now I understood the shape of it, the way the pieces fit together, the quiet meetings, the reassigned projects, the careful distance. I left the office that day with my dignity intact, but my trust in tatters. That evening, I went for a long walk. The air was cool, the streetlights casting soft halos on the pavement. With each step, I felt something shift inside me, not toward revenge, but toward resolute. They mistook my struggle for surrender. They were wrong. I didn't act right away. That surprised even me. The old version of myself would have rushed to explain, to smooth things over, to reassure everyone that I was fine, that I could handle it. But something had changed. I wasn't interested in convincing anyone anymore. I was interested in the truth and in protecting myself. The night after the meeting at work, I sat at my kitchen table again, the envelope of documents spread out neatly in front of me. I made tea and let it steep longer than usual, watching the water darken slowly. There was no panic in me now, just a steady focus, like a muscle I hadn't used in a long time, finally waking up. I started by reading everything carefully, every page, every clause, every date. I highlighted inconsistencies, made notes in the margins, and stacked papers into tidy piles. The more I read, the clearer it became. This wasn't a single impulsive act. It was a plan, thoughtful, coordinated, quiet, and it had been built on the assumption that I wouldn't push back. The next morning, I called a lawyer. Saying the words out loud, "I need some advice about unauthorized decisions made in my name," felt surreal, like I was describing someone else's life. But the lawyer listened without judgment, asking calm, precise questions. When I finished explaining, there was a brief pause on the line. "You still have full legal capacity," she said. What was done may have been framed as concern, but that doesn't make it appropriate or legal." I hung up feeling steadier than I had in weeks. Over the next few days, I took measured steps. I contacted my bank, placed additional protections on my accounts, and requested full activity logs. I gathered emails, messages, and meeting notes from work. I didn't confront my sister again. Not yet. I needed clarity before emotion. At work, I requested a formal review. Walking into that meeting room felt different this time. I sat straighter. I spoke slowly. I brought documentation. When they raised concerns, I addressed them directly, not defensively, but confidently. I acknowledged the strain I'd been under, yes, but I also outlined the steps I had already taken to manage it, the routines, the support, the progress. I didn't stop moving forward, I said. I just stopped pretending it was easy. The room was quiet after that. What I didn't say, but what I hoped they understood, was that struggle and incompetence are not the same thing. Being tired doesn't mean incapable. Being human doesn't mean unfit. After the meeting, I went outside and stood in the sunlight, letting it warm my face. My hands trembled slightly, the aftermath of adrenaline. I breathed deeply until the shaking passed. Later that week, I asked my sister to meet me. We chose a small cafe halfway between our homes, neutral ground. The smell of coffee and baked bread filled the air, and soft music played in the background. She arrived early, sitting with her hands wrapped tightly around her cup. I didn't waste time. I spoke to a lawyer, I said gently, and to my bank, and to my workplace. Her eyes widened. You did? Yes. I met her gaze steadily, because what you did crossed a line. Tears welled up again, but this time I didn't rush to comfort her. This wasn't about easing her guilt. She said, I was afraid. I thought if things got worse, I'd regret not stepping in. I understand fear, I replied, but fear doesn't give you ownership over my life. She nodded slowly, swallowing hard. I need you to hear this, I continued. I am allowed to struggle without being erased. I am allowed to rest without being replaced. And if you want to support me, you have to do it with my consent. The words hung in the air between us, heavy but necessary. She apologized, quietly, sincerely, not with excuses, but with acknowledgement. I believed her, but forgiveness, I knew, would take time. Trust always does. In the days that followed, things began to shift. At work, projects were gradually returned to me. Conversations became more open. The unspoken tension eased. Not everything went back to the way it was, and I didn't want it to. I wanted something better, something more honest. At home, I felt lighter, not because everything was resolved, but because I had chosen myself. I had spoken up without yelling, defended myself without cruelty, moved forward without abandoning my dignity. One evening, as I took my usual walk around the block, I realized I was breathing more easily. The air felt crisp, alive. Streetlights flickered on one by one, steady and patient. I thought about that phrase again. Keep moving forward. It no longer sounded like a command. It sounded like permission. When truth finally steps into the light, it doesn't shout. It stands there quietly and lets everyone decide how they're going to face it. I didn't announce what had happened. I didn't call family meetings or post explanations or demand apologies in public. Still, the story made its way out, as these things always do. Pieces of it traveled through conversations and pauses, through careful wording and meaningful glances, and with each retelling, the shape of it changed, from concern to accountability, from whispered doubt to reluctant respect. At work, the shift was subtle but unmistakable. People began including me again, not just on email threads or meeting invites, but in the way they spoke to me. There was a new attentiveness in their tone, a recognition that I had stood my ground without making anyone the villain. Management issued a quiet clarification, no announcements, just a recalibration of roles and responsibilities. The concerns about my capacity were officially resolved. I watched it happen with a strange sense of distance. There was no triumph in it, no satisfaction, just a calm awareness that dignity, when maintained, has a way of correcting things on its own. Some coworkers approached me privately. One said, "I'm glad you spoke up." Another admitted, "I've been afraid to do the same." We didn't linger on details. We didn't need to. The understanding was enough. In the weeks that followed, my sister felt the consequences too, not as punishment, but as clarity. Family gatherings became quieter. Conversations slowed. People listened more carefully when I spoke. There were no confrontations, no accusations thrown across tables, just a gentle but firm shift in how boundaries were respected. One afternoon, an aunt pulled me aside while dishes soaked in the sink. "You handled that with grace," she said softly. "Not everyone could." I nodded, unsure how to respond. Grace, I had learned, doesn't feel graceful while you're practicing it. It feels like restraint, like choosing not to let anger speak louder than truth. My sister and I spoke less for a while. When we did, our conversations were careful, deliberate. We were learning a new way to be related to each other, one that didn't rely on assumptions or silent authority. There was a moment, weeks later, that stayed with me. We were walking together after a family dinner, the evening cool and still. She stopped suddenly and said, "I didn't realize how much I was taking from you until you stopped letting me." I looked at her then, really looked. She wasn't defensive, she wasn't asking for reassurance. She was acknowledging something difficult about herself. That's how patterns survive, not because anyone is cruel, but because no one questions them. She nodded, eyes fixed on the ground. "I'm trying to do better." I see that, and I meant it. The public consequence wasn't humiliation. It was adjustment. It was people relearning where lines were drawn. It was the quiet recalibration of relationships that had leaned too far in one direction for too long. As for me, I felt something inside me settle. For years, I had believed that strength meant enduring without complaint, that moving forward meant never slowing down. But now, I understood something different. Strength also means choosing visibility, letting others see your limits without letting them define you by them. There were still hard days, mornings when my chest felt tight again, nights when sleep came slowly. Healing isn't linear, and empowerment doesn't erase fatigue. But the difference was this: I no longer interpreted those moments as failure. They were signals, reminders, to adjust, not to disappear. One evening, I sat on my front steps watching the sky darken. A neighbor waved as she passed. Somewhere, a radio played softly. The world felt ordinary again, and in that ordinariness, I found comfort. I thought about how close I had come to standing still out of fear, how easily my story could have been rewritten by others if I hadn't stepped back into it myself. The consequences had rippled outward, changing conversations, reshaping relationships, redefining expectations, not through force, but through clarity. And clarity, I realized, is a powerful thing. It doesn't demand attention. It earns it. Healing didn't arrive with fanfare. It came quietly, in moments so ordinary I almost missed them. It showed up one morning when I woke before my alarm and didn't immediately feel dread. The light through the curtains was soft, forgiving. I lay there for a while, listening to my own breathing, noticing how it rose and fell without effort. That simple ease felt like a gift. I started rebuilding my life the way you rebuild trust, slowly, carefully, without grand promises. I adjusted my schedule at work, not as a concession, but as a choice. I learned to leave on time without apologizing. I took breaks without explaining myself. I spoke up when something felt off, even if my voice wavered slightly. Each small act reinforced something important. I was allowed to take up space without proving my worth through exhaustion. At home, I changed my routines. I moved furniture, opened windows more often, let sunlight rearrange the room. I cooked simpler meals and ate them without distraction. I started tending to a few plants, noticing how they responded not to urgency, but to consistency. There was something comforting in that, watching growth happen quietly, without pressure. My relationship with my sister continued to evolve. We didn't rush back to how things were. We didn't pretend the hurt hadn't happened. Instead, we practiced honesty. When she worried, she asked. When I needed space, I said so. It wasn't perfect. Sometimes old habits surfaced and we had to correct ourselves mid-conversation. But there was effort now. Mutual, visible effort. One afternoon, she helped me repot a plant on my windowsill. Soil spilled onto the counter, and we laughed, really laughed, for the first time in a long while. It felt lighter, not because everything was forgotten, but because we had chosen not to let fear guide us anymore. I also learned to forgive myself for staying silent too long, for believing that strength meant invisibility, for confusing endurance with purpose, Forgiveness, I discovered, isn't about excusing the past. It's about releasing yourself from its grip. I began walking further on my evening strolls, exploring streets I'd never taken before. Some led nowhere interesting, others opened into small parks, quiet corners of the neighborhood I hadn't known existed. I liked that, discovering new paths without expecting them to lead somewhere remarkable. Life, I realized, doesn't always move forward in leaps. Sometimes it inches, sometimes it pauses, sometimes it circles back so you can see old ground with new eyes. The phrase, "keep moving forward," took on a gentler meaning. It no longer meant pushing through pain at all costs. It meant choosing motion over stagnation, curiosity over fear. It meant allowing yourself to adapt. There were days when moving forward meant resting, days when it meant saying no, days when it meant asking for help without shame. I thought about how close I had come to letting others define my capacity based on a single chapter of my life, how easily a moment of struggle can be mistaken for a permanent state, and how dangerous that misunderstanding can be, not just for the people watching, but for the person living it. One evening, as I sat by the window watching rain trace quiet paths down to glass, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Contentment. Not happiness in the loud sense, not excitement, just a steady sense that I was where I needed to be. I wasn't fixed, I wasn't finished, but I was present. And presence, I learned, is the foundation of healing. I began writing again, not for anyone else, but for myself. Short reflections, observations, questions without answers. The act of putting words to experience helped me see patterns, lessons, truths that had been forming quietly all along. One line I wrote stood out to me. Moving forward doesn't erase where you've been, it honors it by continuing anyway. That felt right. As weeks turned into months, the heaviness that once dominated my days loosened its hold. It didn't vanish, but it no longer defined me. I carried it differently now, like a reminder, not a burden. I had faced betrayal without becoming bitter. I had reclaimed my voice without raising it. I had moved forward without losing myself. And that, I realized, was enough. There's something I want to leave with you before I go. For a long time, I thought moving forward meant never stopping, never questioning, never letting anyone see you bend. I thought strength was measured by how much you could carry in silence. But life has a way of correcting us, gently if we listen, firmly if we don't. What I learned is this. Moving forward doesn't mean pretending you're unhurt. It means choosing not to stay where the hurt found you. It means allowing yourself to pause without giving up. It means trusting that even small steps still count. If you're listening to this and you feel tired in a way sleep doesn't fix, I see you. If you've been strong for everyone else and quiet about your own needs, you're not weak, you're human. And being human doesn't disqualify you from moving forward. Sometimes progress looks like setting a boundary. Sometimes it looks like asking for help. And sometimes it looks like simply standing back up after a day that knocked the wind out of you. Wherever you are right now, you don't have to have the whole path figured out. You only have to choose not to stand still forever. I'm still learning, still healing, still walking my way forward, one ordinary day at a time. And if my story has reminded you of your own, of something you've been carrying quietly, then maybe it's served its purpose. So let me ask you something, from one heart to another. When life tested you the hardest, did you keep moving forward, or are you still finding your way back to yourself? If this story spoke to you, take a moment to share your thoughts in the comments. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this, stories about resilience, truth, and quiet strength, consider subscribing and supporting the channel. Until next time, be gentle with yourself. Forward, is still forward.